Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2528. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. I'm founder Mark Greene, and I've handed the keys to this car over to Ginger Baker Rust, who's a lifelong enthusiast. Ginger's here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, and buckle up and get ready for a fun ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today we're in the state of New Hampshire with a very special guest by the name of Kat DeLorean. Hello, Kat. Welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have it in gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We are absolutely excited to have you today.
I am very excited to be allowed to ride along here today, by the way, because some people will be going, wait a minute, Mark, I thought you were gone. But I'm back. I'm helping out because Ginger told me she was having somebody very special on today. Of course, Kat DeLorean, and you all know DeLorean motor cars. So I'm very grateful to be here to get to meet Kat and get to kind of ride along. So for those of you going, what the heck is Mark doing back? I thought I'd come back and play a little bit. So Ginger, take it away.
All right, Kat, please share something about yourself that most people may not know about you.
Well, I'm a high school theater nerd, and when I graduated from high school, I actually studied at Lee Strasberg. And I was a triple threat. I'm a classically trained singer. People are usually surprised when they learn that about me.
Absolutely surprised about that. And I'm a fellow singer as well. So that's one of the things that we have in common.
So does that mean if I ask both of you to sing a song right now, we can do that?
No.
I was going to say we probably could and probably, work well off of each other.
Maybe we'll try that in the future.
Yeah. All right, Kat, let me talk about you just a little bit. Today is a very special show for me in so many ways. This is my first show as the new owner and the driver of Cars Yeah. And I've asked Mark Greene, the founder of Cars Yeah, to co-host with me today. This show will be the first of a two-part series with my good friend and someone who is extremely special to me, who has a tremendous story to share that I believe everyone needs to hear. Kat DeLorean is a proud mother of three, a wife, a mentor, and the daughter of automotive magnate John Z DeLorean. January 6th marked his 100th birthday. Kat has an extensive background in cybersecurity, in leadership, and in mentorship roles for international corporations and major financial institutions for the past 20 years. In this new chapter of life, Kat is dedicated to restoring the legacy of her father and is eager to return excellence to design, engineering, and manufacturing in the automotive industry. Today, we will talk about Kat's journey to today and give a little teaser to the future, which we will talk about in the second part of this podcast next week. So let's take a deeper dive with Kat DeLorean. Mark?
So Kat, this is really fun for me because my history with what your dad built goes back so far. I had a friend when I was growing up whose father bought one of your dad's cars, and I'll never forget getting to get a ride in that thing. And I've also sat in the golden one at the Peterson Museum, which is pretty cool. And there's one at the California Automotive Museum that I got to sit in as well. So I feel like I'm kind of going back to the future. Sorry for using that pun, but I had to use it somehow in this talk, of course. So I want to start off by talking about your early years because so many people know about your father, and we're going to be talking about him. But I really want to see your father through your eyes here for our listeners, because to grow up with a famous father like you did must have been absolutely amazing. I mean, a life as a child and into your adulthood, but we're going to talk about your childhood first, just must have been so different than the rest of us. So could we start with maybe take us back to the earliest years that you remember as a little girl growing up with your dad? You sent Ginger and I some great pictures of you with your father. I love the one with you blowing your bubble gum and sitting. We're going to talk about riding on a Yamaha motorcycle and sitting with him in a DeLorean. Could you kind of take us back to as far back as you can remember? And I'm going to kind of walk you through those early years, your teen years, and then we'll kind of move up into what you're doing today. So give us a little ride in the DeLorean world.
Sure. First, I want to say I'm not the one who claimed to be the highest level in cybersecurity. For those who actually know cybersecurity, I need to protect my cred a little bit. I am a red teamer, and I have a background in hunt, which gives me a purple background, which is kind of cool. Thank you very much for asking this question. It's kind of timely for me at this moment, actually, because just today, this morning, I was talking about how just last night, I had this conversation with my husband that when I stopped in the middle of it, I realized how surreal and odd it was. We were watching a video on YouTube about the history of certain video games, Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam and all of these other development of video games. And in the middle of this video, they start talking about how Steven Spielberg essentially wanted to build what would be considered like a Dave and Buster's, but a more immersive experience, an immersive video game experience place that you could go to. And he was working with him about it. And I just start talking to Jason and I said, oh, that makes sense. You know, Steven Spielberg has video games all over his house. And then I start telling him about going to Steven Spielberg's house and playing on his video games and how he had an actual game room, but then there were pinball machines all around his house. And in the middle of describing this, I stopped and I looked at him and I said, I'm sitting here describing going to Steven Spielberg's house like it's going to our neighbor's house on a Saturday. And we're not just talking about anybody. We're not talking about even just any producer or it's Steven Spielberg level. And I looked at him and I said, my parents are lizard people. And and you know, that's a joke. It's a conspiracy theory some people may know about or not. But when you think about, I live a very real life now. So when I look back on the childhood I had and what it was like growing up, the person I was, my father was one of the 10 richest people in the world on the planet. He was one of the most well-known people on the planet. And my stepfather was the president of ABC and United Artists. They were the top of the top. My father was almost the head of the most powerful corporation in the world at the time. So my family wasn't just the 1%. I come from a level of wealth and status and power that one of the students I went to school with said, I thought I was rich until I went to your house. Wow. Yeah. But I say all of this because it feels so surreal and it feels so not part of who I am because of how my father raised me and what it was like to grow up in that level of wealth and opulence and power and status as John DeLorean's child. Because if you meet my brother and you meet me, a lot of people are very surprised to learn that we're very down-to-earth, normal people. And my answer to that is, you know, what did you expect? Like, what am I supposed to be? Right. But the reality is that the worlds that we come from are very different. The worries are different. The concerns are different. And my father gave us this real childhood, where I grew up on what is now the ex-president's golf course. That was my childhood home, but it didn't feel like a mansion. It felt like a farmhouse. It's where I learned how to ride motorcycles and run through the house in my muddy boots. So he didn't like that. I still did it. The house wasn't one where everything was a museum that you couldn't touch. Yes, it was filled with beautiful antiques and beautiful things, but you could live in it. You could enjoy it. He would take us on vacation and we went skiing in Aspen. I would tell this story and say we went skiing in Aspen like proper rich kids did. But for Christmas Day, we went to the house of a family that the father had gotten multiple sclerosis and lost his job. And we fed them and brought them presents. And that's what we did on our Aspen ski vacation.
Says a lot about who your father was and some of the things I've learned about him, which obviously rubbed off in the way he raised you and your brother and the kind of life you had, was he cared about people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much.
It wasn't just him and his world. He did. And I understand that was, and I won't get too deep into this part of it. One of the reasons he left General Motors was he just felt like that world, that company at that time didn't care a lot about everybody else.
Yes. But this is actually a really, really cool thing that I learned on that point. I met a gentleman named Richard Gargano. And he was essentially, he called himself employee number 2.
And was that employee number 2 at the DeLorean Motor Company?
At JZD Corp. Okay. And this story is so cool. So essentially, my father had a secretary, employee number 1. And then employee number 2 was Richard Gargano. And Richard was somebody who worked in print and photography and, you know, design media. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'd like to hire you as basically an independent contractor. He couldn't put him on payroll. And he wanted to get him all of the tools and materials and machines he needed to print anything he needed, any of his presentations or anything he needed. And essentially, my father was still working at General Motors, and he set up a secret shop in the back of his lawyer's office down the street because as soon as he was promoted, I put the timeline together because I asked Richard about when this all started. It was almost immediately after he was promoted to the 14th floor. He learned that the automotive industry was lying to the public about the or to Congress, to the government, about the cost of putting full passive restraint systems in cars. Wow. He, behind the automotive industry's back, studied with Allstate the actual cost and efficacy of full passive restraint systems. It was presented. He began these efforts in 1972, which is what blew my mind because he told me these timelines. I said, my dad didn't quit until 1974. You can't be telling the truth. So we went and put this all together. And when it was presented to Congress in 1975, you can read the transcripts, and basically Congress says to the automotive execs, how do you reconcile the difference between the report of Allstate, the JZD Corp, and National Highway Transportation Safety Administration and your essentially quote unquote independent researchers who were saying it would cost much more? And after that, shoulder straps became mandatory in cars. And then he continued to fight that battle until airbags were mandatory in cars as well.
Well, that's pretty amazing. I had a guest on the show a while back about airbags and that entire scenario, which is completely different, but the same in many ways. Is the truth wasn't matching with reality. And it's pretty frightening when you hear these things. But we won't digress that far because I want to come back to you growing up and maybe move forward a little bit into, say, the teenage years. Because, that's a time when, and I have a daughter, that's when daughters seem to change a little bit. They become a little more rebellious. They're becoming their own person and so forth. My wife helped me a lot during those years because I went, what happened to my dog? Now I've got a cat. And I don't mean to use that in your name, but I think you know what I mean. Cats are kind of like, I'll let you be my friend when I let you be my friend. Otherwise, feed me and leave me alone. So when you got into those years, which could be very detrimental, we see this with children of movie stars and wealthy people, things go a little off the rails. Did that solidness that your father gave you in your early years continue through those years?
Well, that's not a fair question. Hey, you're asking me to say, were you a good kid as a teenager? Because from what I hear, it could go very badly. I don't know that anybody who has done anything that they weren't proud of in the teenage years would answer that question.
Yes.
Honestly, I will tell you that I am very glad that, camera phones didn't exist when I was a teenager. Yeah. But I actually moved in with my father when I was 14 because my parents' divorce decree said when we were 14, we could decide who we lived with. So I went to live with my dad. So my teenage years were spent in New Jersey tormenting my poor father. But the good news for him was I was a theater kid. And so this meant that I spent a lot of my after school hours in theater. And one of my years in high school, I actually was in the Music Man production twice at two different schools with two different parts at the same time.
Wow.
Which, I don't know what possessed me to agree to do that. But essentially an all boys school needed girls to be shipped into, and our director was working with the guy at that school. Okay. So, I would get home from theater practice at like 1:00 in the morning. I don't know how much time I had to get in trouble doing that.
Well,
so
that's the good thing about sports and theater and all these music. It keeps kids occupied and out of trouble. So there's the good part of that. Well, after you got through high school and you did that, did you go off to college? And was that somewhere far away or?
So you're asking more unfair questions. So the second half of my high school career, I actually went to a boarding school in New Jersey called Lawrenceville. The reason why I went to a boarding school was by choice. I could have even gone as a day student because it was the best academic school that I could get into in the country. The other one was Del Barton, and it was the top one. The only one that beat them academically at the time was Del Barton, and it was an all-boys school, so I couldn't go there. So now I can't tell the story of really what happened, but things kind of went sideways with Christina. Apparently, the parents had agreed verbally and not gone back to court, and things got complicated. I had to move back to California to be with Christina, and the situation that ended up happening after that, the school that I went to after Lawrenceville, I ended up skipping the whole 11th grade because my schooling was so far advanced to what the school I was put into.
Yeah. Yeah. Private school versus public, right?
No, this wasn't public school. It was still a private school, but
just not as advanced.
Correct. The situation ended up, I was supposed to go to college right away, and I didn't. I ended up getting my GED to do so. And then I went on an adventure for a while. I went modeling. I lived on my own for a little bit, and I traveled around. I lived in New York City, and then I lived in Athens, Greece, and came back home, then enrolled in college for computers, got an internship in a wonderful program at Countrywide at the time, which anybody who lived through 2007 knows that company.
Oh, yeah.
And it actually set the stage for the entire rest of my life and my career. This program was this wonderful opportunity. I got trained in all of this different technology that was offered at the organization at the time. When I graduated, I became a developer. And then when Countrywide actually went under, Bank of America came in and bought them. So then I just had this wonderful, storied, incredible career for the next 20 years. I mean, I just had this incredible experience, and then came to retire and then start where we are now. So that's kind of, from birth to death, that's where we are.
The fast track in the DeLorean.
Yeah.
Well, I know Ginger wanted to talk to you a little bit about part of your life that's very important, mentoring. So Ginger?
So Kat, I know that you're dedicated to leading and mentoring others. I've heard many stories of you doing that, not just in the cybersecurity world, but in the automotive world. What have been your greatest accomplishments?
You asked this question, and the first thing that comes to mind is specifically just what are my greatest accomplishments? And it may be seeded by the fact that you mentioned mentorship first. But just the other day, I had a mentee that I had been working with, hadn't spoken to them in about a year, reach out and want to speak to me. And they were in a place where they felt kind of lost and down on themselves. They had left a sure thing position to go back to school to better themselves that they had not yet finished. They didn't fail. They didn't not do it. They were still doing it. They were still achieving. They were still accomplishing, but they felt like such a failure because they just hadn't yet finished. They had taken a little bit longer to do it. And in that moment, I had a lot of things going on. I stopped everything. They asked how much time I had for the day. I said, as much time as you need. I sat and I talked to this person who then began to get emotional, just being able to be told, it's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. You haven't yet failed. You're still okay. And last week I followed up. I was able to follow up with that person and all the things that they wanted to do that they were afraid of and they felt they weren't worthy of, they were planning on moving forward with.
I've had the pleasure of mentoring people, and I know what it means to me, but what do you think? Because I hear you getting emotional on this one. I'm sure there's been others too, but what is it about mentoring others? And there's a little trick behind this question that longtime Cars Yeah listeners will know, and that is what I've learned is the secret sauce to life. But what is it for you about mentoring others that evokes that emotion that you're sharing with us right now?
Everybody thinks they want to change the world, and they think they have to be John DeLorean to do it, but you don't.
Now that's a simple, succinct sentence. Yeah.
That is.
Yeah. No, I love it. That
is so true.
That's really, really, really great what you shared right there. And I'll remind listeners, and I'll share with you, Kat, Ginger's heard this, is people asked me after as long as I was doing Cars Yeah, what I learned. And I said, that's real simple, is that helping people is what makes you happy.
Yes. Yeah.
If it's all about you, you're not as happy as you are when it's all about others. And I'm guessing, again, even with your father's massiveness, it sounds like to me, again, with his care for people and what I've learned and through talking with Matt, Ginger, and I a few weeks ago and reading his book, your dad, that was important to him at all levels, racially as well, because of the problems back in those days. So again, you got a lot of your dad rubbed off on you there. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yeah. He was people first. And I get that the stories that I hear from the people he managed, the people who worked with him, just when I first started all of this, I didn't even start it. When D&G happened to me, I want to say people started reaching out, and I got the story of this one person who said, I pumped your father's gas when I was a teenager, and he was so kind to me. It impacted my life forever. If you need anything, just reach out.
Wow.
And I tell people, and he was the CEO of an aerospace company, and I tell people, I had 80 years of his existing on this planet, getting his gas pumped and served food by people that rained down upon me for the next 6 months in messages and stories.
Yeah.
A guy who my dad brought his bar stools to have them fixed. My father's saw him getting evicted from his location one day, and my dad tried to help save his lease, and just all these little things that he would do, small acts of kindness he would leave around the world. He taught us what was important in life. And I really believe, and I'm working to actually interview the people who worked for us to prove or disprove my hypothesis. I believe pretty much everybody who worked for us was in a position where they needed some help or a second chance at the time he gave it to them.
Well, in a way, you've answered this next question for me, and it's almost a ridiculous question to ask someone like you. And we always like to ask people about inspirations, mentors that have mentored you. And obviously, I'm guessing your dad's going to be the answer to this, because you've shared these anecdotes with us throughout our talk today of things that he did that have rubbed off and helped you realize the importance of that. And so many of us who encounter famous people, was he your driving inspiration? And is he still today? It sounds like it.
Yes, in every way. But I can't give him all the credit. I give him the credit for turning me into a person who is coachable and teachable, that has been able to find success through mentorship myself. And then my number one answer in almost every job interview I've ever had is, I don't know, but here's how I'll find out. And that comes from the groundwork that he laid in teaching me how to look up answers and find them for myself. But he passed away when I was still fairly young. So I have to not discount credit where credit is due. I have been mentored by every person who has taken a moment to teach me anything in this world. But very specifically, there are a handful of people who dedicate, and still to this day, dedicate their time to helping me grow. Just this morning, I asked for help from one of my longtime mentors. Hey, I'm working on this thing, this leadership thing. Can we talk about it? Can you guide me through what I'm doing? And I say this because a lot of the theme of this podcast is career growth. People should understand that mentorship isn't just about a formal relationship with somebody where you sit down and do a mentorship program. It is accepting knowledge from all those around you. It's being accepting of that knowledge from those around you that makes them want to teach you. Don't pretend like you know the answer. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Be thirsty for knowledge. And there isn't anything in this world that could stand in your way. You can literally be anything you want, because there'll be a teacher there for you.
Would you say, and I've heard this from many successful people that I've known, is be a great listener?
Yes.
Is that a thing?
Yes.
that it seemed like your father taught you that and did that with the people around him at all levels? Just, when you're that high up in an organization like that, it's real, I would imagine, if you're not a strong person, I'll just say a nice person, to treat those below you like subservient in a way. But sounds like to me, you mentioned the story of the barstool guy. He's talking to somebody who's doing that. That's their livelihood. He recognizes the importance of that. They're not just somebody who fixes stuff for you, like the gardener or the housekeeper or whoever it might be, the person serving you meals. So it sounds like that concept about others is what really rubbed off for you.
Yes, that's one of the core things that is part of the design of a program. One of the ways in which I ask for the program to be designed and have designed it is that all the students would work together no matter what their job. So some of the students are going to go into apprenticeship, and some of them would go on to higher education. Some of them will go direct to the line, and some of them will go on to engineering. Well, okay, let's understand that those who went direct to work now have 4 to 8 years more of work finances in their bank account. The ones who start 8 years later have college debt and 8 years behind you. Maybe they need to make more money in order just to catch up. But also, it's important to understand that the engineer can engineer the car, but somebody's got to build it. And if nobody takes out the trash, Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout will die in the pile of it. And so, every single person, from the person who engineers the car to the person who takes out the trash on the factory floor, there is no one person who is more important than the other. None. You're just all different. You're just all part of the team that needs to function. And my father was very keen in instilling these values in my brother and I, which is, again, something that is surreal to me. My brother, he wants to create a dog rescue. I want to create an education program for kids. We want to leave a positive impact on this world. And neither one of us, if you ask Zach if he had money, what he would do, he would buy a small piece of land in Alaska and go save dogs. He's not going to go buy a private jet. And to come from that level of wealth and influence and status and have all of that, and then to really just want to be happy with what you have and want what I believe is important in life, I find myself in awe every day of how he did that, of how he accomplished that. And the only thing I can say is, I tell people, you'll never listen to me when I tell you about what a great man my dad is. I'm his daughter. I'm just always going to be his daughter talking nice about her dad. So really stop and think about the person that he was able to turn his children into, again, in that situation, and what kind of a person it takes to instill those values in someone. And he was that incredible of a human being that he allowed us to appreciate what matters in life.
Exactly. Wonderful. Well, as if we haven't tugged on your heartstrings enough, we're gonna have Ginger, what I call the challenge question, which can get tough for some people, but I'm going to give this one to Ginger because, she's in the hot seat today with her new running of the laps in the cars. Yeah, a car here. We'll call it a DeLorean today. Ginger, take it away.
Well, Kat, I wanted to go back a little bit when you were talking about inspirational, the conversations, the personal conversations that you and I have had. And, and you've talked about, how you were raised, even though you had the wealth that you did, you were raised to be an everyday person in an everyday life. And, I think there's a lot of misconception out there that you guys still have that wealth and you don't.
Huh.
And what that did, honestly, as bad as it was, but your dad actually, because of how he raised you and your brother, that he actually somewhat, not knowing at the time, preparing you for that big change and how to overcome, so many obstacles and, and how to overcome those things and to be relatable and be able to live an everyday life, so to speak. Again, from our personal conversations and things that we've talked about on our own struggles and our own obstacles and failures that we both have overcome, that you and I have had, many similar things. I wanted to ask you, what has been the biggest obstacle or failure that you feel like that you've overcome so far? And how did you move past that situation?
I had in my mind an idea of what I wanted to be and what I wanted my future to look like. And I failed to accept that there are things in this world that are outside of my control. I dealt with a difficult situation at work and with something that caught me off guard during the pandemic. So everybody was a little bit raw. And I had an opportunity to move from the team I was on and leave the situation, which is how I have dealt with most every time I found somebody difficult at work. You're never going to change them. Being angry at them and wasting your energy and time and focusing on what they've done to wrong you is not going to change anything at all. In this particular situation, I was trying to stick it out for a false perspective of loyalty. I was trying to stay in a bad situation because I had promised a friend I would hang out in their job until they got back, so everything was there. So I put myself in a really bad situation. But I also wanted to be where I was forever. I didn't want to move forward. I didn't want to move back. I didn't want to change. I didn't want to leave. And this particularly difficult situation put me in a place where I had to reflect I was also offered an opportunity to go do something else, to teach more, to branch out. And I kept saying no. I kept saying no. I actually said no about 4 or 5 times to this person who was chasing me. And then I finally said yes. And I let go. I had to let go of everything I had decided about my life, everything I had decided about what the rules were, what fair was, what my life was going to look like. I had to let go of all of that and take a chance. And I felt like I had let go of everything that I had worked for. I felt like I had abandoned everything that I had tried to build. I felt like I had let myself down, the promise I had made to be in the same place doing the same thing for decades. And today, this very day, I find myself in a position of leadership 3, 4 levels above where I was. Probably two or three levels above where I was, with my own team, my own department, actually reporting directly to the CISO, in a place that I am happier than I could have ever imagined, with a group of individuals that I can communicate and jive with on a level I never thought I'd find again. And my life now has many things that are falling into place that didn't start until I let go of what I thought I wanted and needed, and accepted that there are things in this world that cannot change.
Super awesome.
Yeah, I know, Kat, you and I have had, conversations about that, we're very loyal people, and that loyalty has been our greatest asset, but it's also at times been our biggest detriment, because you stay so loyal to a situation almost to your detriment. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's really amazing that you've been able to do what you've done and move to the level that you are now, and recognize that you needed to make that change.
I wouldn't have if I had not been put in a situation that from the outside looks terrible. And the one thing that I think people can learn that will really change their lives dramatically is to understand that nothing is good and nothing is bad. Everything just is. Mm-hmm. And it's a catalyst for change. Something that may feel bad is generally a catalyst for change. And it can be something as devastating as death. Right. But it still isn't good or bad. It just is. It's just the reality of life. And once you accept that, you let go of the personal blame and shame, and you're able to appreciate what's good in your life and not what's wrong with it.
Absolutely.
I had a guest on the show, and he has become a friend named David Sweet. And I'll share this quote from him that I pull out at times like that. And I think many of us, not everybody, has been, and I'll say fortunate enough to go through a difficult time like that, because it does change you. To make the decision to call forth change in your life, your thoughts and your consciousness, that is the edge of courage. And what you just said to me brought that to light. So I really appreciate it. That is huge for a new year. That's a great thing for many people listening who know they're in a difficult spot and it's hard to change, but listen to Kat's words. You can do it. Kat, I'm not surprised that we're going long here. And here's what I want to do. If you'll come back next week, I want to do a second part to the show, because we want to dive further, even deeper into the corner of what is the future for Kat DeLorean. Would you be able to do that? Come back next week and do another show with us?
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Okay. That's very cool. Well, listeners, I want you to remember that you can find links to everything we've talked about today on Kat's show notes page on the Cars Yeah website. Just go to carsyeah.com, type Kat DeLorean into the search bar there. And I'm going to let Ginger say a little goodbye here before we reconvene.
Kat, I wanted to thank you for being so generous with your time and sharing your experiences, with our listeners and with us today. We are excited to hear about the future of Kat DeLorean and the future of DeLorean. So listeners, make sure you listen to next week for our second part of this podcast on Cars Yeah. And on that note, we will talk again, and I'll see you down the road.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to come back next week and continue the story.
We are as well. This is going to be fun. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find today's guest show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up. It's an ebook filled with gorgeous photos of fuel filler fun, including quotes from our inspiring automotive enthusiasts. While you're on the website, sign up for weekly blogs and a whole lot more. Download your copy today, and Ginger will see you next time here on Cars Yeah!